Hello everyone, and thank you for taking the time to view my presentation looking at the recovery patterns in the sway balance mobile application scores in collegiate athletes who have sustained a concussion. Concussion assessment is multifaceted in order to evaluate the multiple domains affected by concussion and to direct appropriate treatment strategies. With no known biomarker available, a comprehensive concussion evaluation must entail evaluating multiple domains, including neurocognitive, postural control, and reaction time components. Neurocognitive testing has been utilized for many years in concussion assessment to evaluate verbal memory, visual motor processing speed, and reaction time. Post-concussion, cognitive functioning deficits typically return to baseline within 5 to 7 days, but can persist up to 14 days after the initial injury. Migration from pen and paper tests to more comprehensive computerized programs have allowed for cognitive functioning assessment to be more easily accessible and user-friendly. Similar changes in increased use technology has also occurred with postural control testing. What began simply with the Rungberg test, first developed in the early 19th century, only required the patient to stand with the arms straight out, palms up, with eyes open and closed. This single stance testing has transitioned into a combination of stances with different foot positions and testing surfaces. The balance error scoring system is most commonly used by clinicians, but is most commonly scored in a subjective manner by the clinician counting errors. The best is moderate to good reliability. However, it is suggested that due to high variability between raters, that the same clinician should score sequential testing and training be conducted so that errors are counted correctly. This can tend to not be conducive to the objective and multidisciplinary approach that is sought after when assessing a concussion, as a patient may be assessed by multiple clinicians across the post-injury recovery time and is still a relatively subjective method. Reaction time has also become a more utilized aspect of concussion assessment. The ruler drop test showed sensitivity between concussed and non-concussed patients. Clinical and computerized methods of reaction time have been compared against one another. At a 1-year interval, test-retest reliability remained consistent between clinical and computerized methods of reaction time. For post-concussion subjects, it is believed that clinical methods of reaction time return to baseline similar to the time of other cognitive measures, about 14 days. Technological advances have allowed clinicians to have an objective method of scoring postural control tests by utilizing different types of force plates and inertial-based sensors. In 2015, 9.5% of NCAA schools surveyed had begun to transition away from subjective methods to objective-based postural control measures, including the sensory organization test, sway balance mobile application, Nintendo Wii balance board, and other types of objective assessments not specified. These objective assessments are allowing for a decreased need for the same clinician scoring the test across multiple time periods. Overall, this creates greater inter-rater reliability and a better chance of a multidisciplinary approach. The purpose of the study was to determine the recovery patterns of the sway balance mobile application in collegiate athletes who had been diagnosed with a concussion. It is hypothesized that balance reaction time would decrease from baseline scores immediately after the concussive injury and then slowly return back to baseline. This study included 32 athletes from an NCAA Division III institution. Of those 32 athletes, 24 were males and 8 were females. Inclusion criteria included participating in collegiate athletics at the data collection site, being diagnosed by the team physician with a concussion, and having a sway balance baseline completed. Exclusion criteria included not being diagnosed with a concussion by the team physician and not having completed the institution's return to play criteria. This data was collected as part of a retrospective database review data that was obtained through standard procedure. All data collected was approved by AT Still's ARP and accepted by the data collection site's IRB. For those who are not familiar with sway balance, this mobile application utilizes the accelerometers commonly found within mobile devices to record and track postural sway during postural control and reaction time testing. Post-injury data collection took place between August 2018 and April 2019 and utilized multiple versions of the sway balance application. With this application, higher scores are intended to mean better results for both postural control and reaction time scores on a scale of 0 to 100. Multiple studies have been conducted in healthy subjects looking at the reliability of the sway balance mobile application. Research has shown moderate to good reliability in healthy youth, high school, and collegiate athletes when sequential trials were conducted. Excellent reliability was found when weekly trials were conducted in healthy adults. Reliability of the sway balance mobile application is most consistent across 2 repetitive trials when an acclimatization trial is completed. A few validity studies have also been conducted with the application. When compared to the Biodex balance system, the sway balance mobile application had very similar results. Also, the reaction time portion of the application has also had strong correlations to computer-based models when repetitive trials are conducted. Two more studies have established normative values for the sway balance mobile application. Studies included a population between the ages of 5 and 22. Both studies found very similar and correlating results. With increased age came increased postural control ability. Throughout the time frame, females had greater overall stability than males. For reaction time, those between the ages of 13 to 17 had peak performances compared to other ages, and males typically had faster reaction times than females. The sway balance mobile application consists of 5 separate balance tests along with 5 reaction time trials. These 10 items make up one complete sway balance trial. The 5 balance tests include a double leg, single leg right, single leg left, tandem right, and tandem left stances, each for 10 seconds with the eyes closed on a firm surface. The device utilizing the sway balance mobile application should be held flat against the sternum during the balance trials. If an athlete has trouble balancing during the trials, they are encouraged to return to the testing position as quickly as possible with as minimal displacement as possible. During the reaction time trials, the athlete holds the mobile device out in front of them. During the test, the mobile device will be held steady while the screen is white. As soon as the screen turns from white to orange, the athlete shakes the mobile device, generating reaction time. This is completed 5 times. Once testing is completed, the software within the application generates a baseline composite score for both postural control and reaction time. The application gives an overall composite score for the 5 balance tests, and then that can be broken down into individual stance scores. Of the 5 reaction time trials that are conducted, the fastest and slowest are removed, and the 3 remaining trials are averaged to give a reaction time composite score. As part of the athletic participation clearance data collection site, athletes completed a sway balance baseline at the beginning of their freshman year. If a concussive injury was suspected, the athlete was removed from play and a sway balance test was administered as soon as possible. For the study, the independent variable was the time when trials were conducted. 3 trials were included in the study and labeled as baseline, post-injury 1, and return to play. Dependent variables included composite scores, individual stance scores, and reaction time scores. Once data collection was finished, a statistical analysis was completed. SPSS statistical software is utilized to calculate mean and standard deviations for composite scores, individual stance scores, and reaction time scores for baseline, post-injury 1, and return to play tests. Differences across time points were analyzed with a repeated measures analysis and variance. Significant findings were further explored by a Bonfroni post hoc analysis. Initial findings of the data analysis showed the mean time from baseline to post-injury 1 was 351.5 days, with a standard deviation of 282.12 days. The mean recovery time from post-injury 1 to return to play was 15.94 days, with a standard deviation of 20.1 days. The composite scores differed across time periods, with significantly lower scores noted at post-injury 1 tests compared to baseline or return to play tests. There is no difference in scores between baseline or return to play. At baseline, composite scores had a mean of 79.97, then dropped to 6.94 points at post-injury 1, and then regained those 6.94 points and returned to baseline levels when the return to play test was completed. Results were broken down, and each of the 5 individual stances were analyzed. Scores on the double leg stance and single leg right stance did not differ across time points. Tandem right stance showed a difference between test sessions, with the post-injury 1 score being lower than baseline and return to play. However, none of the pairwise comparisons reached significance. Single leg left and tandem left scores had statistically significant differences across time points, with post-injury 1 test demonstrating worse postural control than baseline, but no difference was found between baseline and return to play scores for those 2 stances. These charts give a visual representation of the composite scores of individual stances and their standard deviations. In the column graph, you can see the decrease from baseline to post-injury 1 and then the scores returning back to baseline levels. You can also see the greatest decrease in the single leg left and tandem left stances. Findings for reaction time are similar to our hypothesis and followed the same trend that postural control scores did. Reaction time scores differed across time points, with scores significantly decreasing from baseline and then improving back to baseline levels during the return to play test. Overall, statistically significant composite scores showed a mean baseline score of 74.18, then a decrease to 67.63, followed by an overall improvement to 76.4 at the time of returning to play. Differences were found between different stance positions that were included in the standardized protocol. Single leg and tandem scores showed varying differences. While both scores showed a decrease in baseline scores during post-injury 1 test and then an improvement at the return to play test, only a single leg left and tandem left tests were found to be statistically significant. It could be that leg dominance played a role in these 2 tests and the increased demands that are needed from the sensory motor system in those positions compared to the double leg stance, which had the least amount of variability, caused these differences. The decreased scores from baseline to post-injury indicates that effects of a concussive injury has on visual, vestibular, and sensory motor systems. The return to play test shows that these systems have recovered and scores returned to baseline levels. The findings of the current study are similar to other studies of postural control following concussion that have used different assessment protocols, including the BESS, modified BESS, force plates, and inertial sensor-based systems. Only one study tracked subjects and reported results for an extended period of time. This study followed subjects until 5 days post-injury and found an initial decrease in test scores after injury and then a return to baseline levels. Even though subject results were not reported past the first initial test, similar studies have found that concussed subjects do show an alteration and decline in postural control scores immediately after injury. Reaction time findings in post-concussion subjects have been similar to findings in postural control assessment. The ruler drop test has been able to distinguish between concussed and non-concussed subjects, while computerized reaction time methods have shown a significant decrease in scores post-concussion. This mobile application could mean many different things for clinicians. Most importantly, it was able to detect deficits in postural control and reaction time after a concussive injury had occurred while utilizing an objective assessment. A number of limitations, however, exist in this study. Even though sway balance has an established recommended protocol, this data was pulled from a retrospective database where multiple clinicians were testing both at baseline and post-injury. This could allow for slight differences to have occurred between athletes when testing was conducted. Also, the population used in this study was very small and exclusive to college-age athletes from a single institution. This could not allow data collected to be generalizable to other populations. The setting is another factor that needs to be taken into consideration. Post-injury tests could be affected depending on if the athlete's post-injury test took place in a sideline environment, quiet setting, and the type of surface that the test was completed on. Further studies should be conducted on evaluating the responsiveness of the sway balance mobile application in a larger sample of concussed collegiate athletes along with other levels of athletes and non-athletes alike. Overall, both balance and reaction time portions of the sway balance mobile application have shown to have scores that decrease initially after injury and then return back to baseline levels at the time of returning to play from a concussive injury. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to view my presentation, and please let me know if you have any questions.